You're very straightforward, and while it sometimes stings, I secretly admire the way you never hide the truth. You're very straightforward, and though it exposes my flaws, I'd rather your honesty than someone else's sweet lies. You're very straightforward, and it scares me how much I crave the rawness of your words over anyone's polished silence. You're very straightforward, and sometimes it feels like you're cutting me open just to teach me how to heal. You're very straightforward, and that sharp honesty is the very thing that makes me trust you more than anyone else. You're very straightforward, and even though it makes me uncomfortable, I find myself addicted to your brutal clarity. You're very straightforward, and I've realized the truth always tastes bitter at first, but becomes medicine later. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I wonder if you know how powerful your words feel when they land in my chest. You're very straightforward, and I think that's why people can't forget you. Truth leaves scars, and you've left yours on me. You're very straightforward, and though the world hides behind masks, you stand there unshaken, showing me what real is. You're very straightforward, and in a society addicted to sugar-coated lies, you're the rare taste of raw honesty. You're very straightforward, and every time you speak, I feel both exposed and strangely liberated at once. You're very straightforward, and though your words burn like fire, they also warm me with their undeniable truth. You're very straightforward, and in your rawness, I see the courage I've always been too afraid to show. You're very straightforward, and that's why your silence hurts more than anyone else's sentences. You're very straightforward, and that sharpness cuts through my illusion, leaving me naked with reality. You're very straightforward, and though it feels like a storm, I'd rather drown in truth than float on lies. You're very straightforward, and that bluntness makes me feel seen in ways gentle words never could. You're very straightforward, and I find myself addicted to the way you strip away my comforting delusions. You're very straightforward, and though your honesty scares me, I'd rather bleed from truth than starve from lies. You're very straightforward, and that makes me realize how exhausting it is to deal with people who aren't. You're very straightforward, and sometimes your words echo in my chest for days, haunting me with truth. You're very straightforward, and though it can be cruel, I respect you because at least I know where I stand. You're very straightforward, and your words are like lightning, sudden, blinding, impossible to ignore. You're very straightforward, and maybe that's why I can't stop thinking about you. Your unforgettable truth in a world of lies. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I love it. Sometimes I hate it. but I never doubt it. You're very straightforward, and I can't decide if it's a weapon you wield or a gift you give. You're very straightforward, and it makes me question why the rest of us waste time dressing the truth in pretty lies. You're very straightforward, and your honesty has the power to either heal me or destroy me completely. You're very straightforward, and though I flinch at your words, they always awaken something I've been avoiding. You're very straightforward, and in your voice, I hear the kind of truth my soul has been craving for years. You're very straightforward, and it makes me both admire you and fear you at the same time. You're very straightforward, and sometimes it feels like you're the mirror I've been too afraid to look into. You're very straightforward, and I wonder if you know how many hearts envy your fearless honesty. You're very straightforward, and though it hurts, it also makes me fall deeper for the way you refuse to fake it. You're very straightforward, and it reminds me that love isn't just about sweetness. It's about honesty, even when it stings. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I pray for gentleness. Yet I thank you for never lying to me. You're very straightforward, and I realize now that the people who fear you most are the ones drowning in lies. You're very straightforward, and though you terrify me, you're also the safest person because I know you won't pretend. You're very straightforward, and maybe that's why I can't walk away. You speak to me like no one else dares. You're very straightforward, and though the world may call you harsh, I call you real. You're very straightforward, and in your honesty, I find a strange kind of beauty I can't resist. You're very straightforward, and your raw words remind me that truth always cuts before it heals. You're very straightforward, and I wonder if you know your honesty is the reason I both hate and need you. You're very straightforward, and every sentence from you feels like a truth I can't unhear. You're very straightforward, and sometimes your words slice me open, but at least I know where I truly stand. You're very straightforward, and it's wild how your honesty both terrifies me and makes me feel safe at once. You're very straightforward, and I can't deny your words are the only ones that echo endlessly inside my head. You're very straightforward, and I've realized honesty isn't cruelty. It's the rarest form of love people often run from. You're very straightforward, and though it burns to hear you, I'd rather your fire than anyone else's smoke. You're very straightforward, and that raw truth feels like medicine disguised as pain, healing what I didn't know was broken. You're very straightforward, and I admire the way you never water yourself down just to make others comfortable. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I wish I could hide from your honesty, but I also crave it deeply. You're very straightforward, and it shocks me how beautiful truth sounds when it's spoken without fear. You're very straightforward, and your words challenge me in ways silence never could. You're very straightforward, and it feels like standing in sunlight. Harsh, blinding, yet undeniably real. You're very straightforward, and though I sometimes want to run, I always find myself drawn back to your truth. You're very straightforward, and your honesty is both the wound and the cure I never expected. You're very straightforward, and it makes me realize how rare it is to meet someone who refuses to fake love. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I feel like you're undressing my soul without even touching me. You're very straightforward, and though I wish for softness, I know I'd miss your sharp edges if they vanished. You're very straightforward, and your words linger like thunder after a storm, impossible to ignore. You're very straightforward, and I envy the fearlessness you carry, while the rest of us hide behind masks. You're very straightforward, and your honesty has become my most painful comfort. You're very straightforward, and if this touched your soul, don't scroll, like, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. You're very straightforward, and though your truth bruises, it awakens parts of me I thought were asleep. You're very straightforward, and I can't help but respect the way your words never tremble with doubt. You're very straightforward, and that raw honesty feels like lightning. It strikes, it shocks, but it lights up the darkness. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I feel like your words strip away the lies I've been clinging to. You're very straightforward, and I wonder if you know how magnetic honesty feels to those starved of truth. You're very straightforward, and though I flinch, I can't help but love you more for refusing to sugarcoat. You're very straightforward, and it makes me realize love without honesty is nothing but a performance. You're very straightforward, and your words break me open, but in the breaking I find freedom. You're very straightforward, and though people call you cruel, I call you pure. You're very straightforward, and every syllable from you feels like a truth my soul was waiting to hear. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I wonder if your honesty is a shield or a gift. You're very straightforward, and I've never met anyone who can pierce my silence with such few words. You're very straightforward, and though it hurts, it also feels like the only thing that's real between us. You're very straightforward, and your voice feels like the storm that forces me to rebuild myself stronger. You're very straightforward, and it makes me question every sweet lie I've ever believed before you. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I think your truth is the only reason I'm still awake at night. You're very straightforward, and I respect you because your words may cut, but they never deceive. You're very straightforward, and though your honesty frightens me, it also keeps me grounded. You're very straightforward, and maybe that's why I can't walk away. Your truth feels like gravity pulling me in. You're very straightforward, and though your words wound, they heal deeper than silence ever could. You're very straightforward, and I can't decide if your truth is punishment or liberation. You're very straightforward, and it's strange how I hate you in the moment, but love you for it later. You're very straightforward, and that's why I can never accuse you of being fake. You live unmasked. You're very straightforward, and sometimes I wonder if you know how heavy your words can feel on my chest. You're very straightforward, and yet I find myself craving your sharpness as if it awakens my numb heart. You're very straightforward, and your truth feels like fire, dangerous, consuming, but impossible to live without.